You're listening to Depth Perception, supported by our patrons on Patreon. Leo here, thanks for listening. Today we're going to be talking about Mount Shasta. A content warning is due for this episode. We're going to be talking about colonialism and genocide as part of our discussion. This will be an attempt to recover some of the thoughts and insights that we had last October when we did this episode for the first time, and it was unfortunately lost due to an error on my part. I hope you enjoy the episode.
We're talking about Mount Shasta, all right? Let's get it out of the way. We tried to do a Mount Shasta episode before, but nobody other than us has any reason to believe that because there's no evidence. And a couple things came out of that session that I think were of great importance to the podcast. One of them was an admittedly oft unused term, revelation, which means, at least to me, I mean, maybe you have a different idea about it, but to me, it means it's like the concept of the iceberg, right? It's that the further down you go, you know, there's always more iceberg. There's always another layer of a mystery. And one of the most mysterious things is why people think Mount Shasta has a city inside of it, even though it's a fucking volcano.
Yeah.
Which means it doesn't have a city inside. It has molten rock, I think. I think that's what a volcano means.
Yeah. It has the potential to spew molten rock under pressure.
And as we all know, liquid rock is the opposite of solid rock, which is what cities are made out of.
Can't argue with that.
No, you can't. But the other thing that came out of the Mount Shasta episode, the real aha moment where the light bulb flicked on over our heads, was the idea that colonialism is not something that any aspect of a culture is necessarily safe from, right?
Yes.
Mythology is not safe, which is, you know, the big one of Mount Shasta. Religion, sacredness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sacramental is not the right word, but some word that is what I mean is what I'm trying to say. So I think we have to talk about what the Mount Shasta legend is in the context of white America. Certain groups of people believe that there is an advanced white society that lives beneath the mountain that came from the land of Lemuria, which was sunk like, what is it, like 19,000 years ago or something? Or something close to it.
In some year that nothing of the sort actually happened, for sure. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely there were not like post-humans before regular humans died out. Oh, right. Okay. So this advanced race came to the Americas. They got beneath the mountain and have spaceships in a city called Telos where they have like all their needs are met. I mean, this is kind of like what reminds me of the Eloi a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't really have to worry about anything. They live in like an airtight space. You know, they grow all the food they need. They have everything sorted out. And it's interesting that in one way it kind of does this what's the word? I just learned a new word. Euhemeristic. Yeah. It's sort of this euhemeristic thing where what that means is that you use mythology to explain real events, which is something that I do a lot. I talk about how I have the theory that fire theft or fire gift stories explain how the human race conquered fire or tamed fire or whatever.
Right, like that they contain some element of
historicity.
Yeah, even if that historicity is just an impression or a feeling about the feeling that you had when it.
Yeah. So in one way, this kind of like, although it's like, we know how people came to America, right? They crossed the Bering Land Bridge and all that, but in a way, this idea that these people came from a land that doesn't exist in the same way anymore and settled in this new place, it kind of, in a way, if you're like play a little tricky with it, it kind of explains how, indigenous peoples came to America. But what it also describes is how white people came to the Americas and conquered it. And it's like, what is it? Recursive? Is that the word I'm looking for? Or I hate to say Ouroboros, but like
it's cyclical.
It kind of just folds in on itself, the way that, we came to this place and we co-opted this sacred mountain. I recommend the Gorillaz song "Fire Coming Out of the Monkey's Head" if you want to think more about this, and the music video as well. We came to this place. It's really reminiscent of John Dee talking about how, like, oh no, King Arthur actually conquered America, so we should go get it back, like, to honor him. We come here and we find this place, Mount Shasta, that is sacred to the people that live there. They have their own stories. I mean, certain peoples believe that their creator lives in the mountain, according to what I've read. And what we say is actually, no, that's not true. They don't live there. It's white people that have like a perfect city with technology. And actually, the French Comte de Saint-Germain is the guy that, even though he lived a couple hundred years ago, he's like an important figure in Rosicrucianism. And he's actually the guy that showed me how to get into the mountain and like all the wondrous things that exist there. So that, I suppose, is the thesis of this, that mythology and sacred places are not strictly safe from colonial exploitation.
This is something that's really apparent because there are people. The Winnemem Wintu, right? So the Winnemem Wintu, they still have access to this place, but they now have to share it with white people, and there's nothing they can do about it. And the white people who go there go, well, our beliefs are what they are. Like, we want to use the space too, But so much of their belief is drawn from it. It's like parasitic on the previous sacred status of the mountain. I think to argue that they independently found it as sacred would be a completely bad faith argument. It's obvious they're even incorporating rites from the Winnemem Wintu, right? So there's an issue there. But it's also like, it's important to remember, like, even, Onondaga Lake, is a sacred site. It sits in the area, what is the capital of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations for thousands of years. You know what I mean? Like this, and there's a mall next to it, and most of the area around the lake was like the ground is full of like pollutants from previous industry. It was at one point one of the most polluted lakes in the world. Top 3. It might have been number 1 at one point.
It's like a pretty hideous environment. It really captures like the idea of brutalism, where it's like something just kind of appeared for no reason.
You mean like the aesthetic aspect of brutalism that is that?
Yeah. I mean, like what they were talking, to shout out Weird Studies again, like what they were talking about last week in the Pan episode.
Yeah, so we have this legend that requires ancient ascended beings to have not only lived on the earth, but fought a war, it's Lemurians, fought a war with the Atlanteans. The war, by the way, being over basically what really reads like a very banal, uncritical, just, I don't know, what's the word, like mythification of like modern, like, not even colonial actions, but colonial rhetoric, right? It's the story between, it's the It's the Lemurians who think that they're truly ascended beings. All of them look like white Aryans. They look like Nordics. The Lemurians think that the so-called, and this is literally the source that I have is telosuk.co.uk. This is about the Telos Society's like religion.
Which, yeah, I mean, they're colonizing from the other side of the ocean.
And there's also a very active chapter in Israel as well for some reason. So they're everywhere for some reason. So they literally say, okay, the Lemurians were noble. They said that the less evolved cultures should be left on their own to continue their own evolution at their own pace according to their own understandings and pathways, whereas the Atlanteans believed that all the less evolved cultures should be brought under sway and controlled by the two more evolved civilizations. So the Atlanteans not only thought that they should be controlling these civilizations, but they thought that the Lemurians should be too. This caused a series of thermonuclear wars between Atlantis and Lemuria. Hard to believe if these civilizations were so similar that one would have such a big difference, really a big difference about what should be done about these so-called less evolved civilizations if they both admit freely that they're less evolved and then also annihilate each other over it.
Yeah, most of the most well-armed countries in the modern day have a pretty similar idea of what should happen to people that they view as lesser.
That's true.
They're all pretty much on the same page.
That's true. 100%.
Yeah, well, one thing I find pretty confusing is whether or not the Lemurians won. I don't really understand.
It seems like what happened is everybody died except for some Lemurians who fortunately made a fortress in the mountain of Mount Shasta.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate about the fate of the Atlanteans. It's above my pay grade.
Also, somehow California is part of Lemuria in this version, which is not even what the original guy who theorized Lemuria, who was also wrong, would have said.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I feel like I remember from our last research, but I didn't want to, poison my mind by reading all this stuff again and, just diving into a rabbit hole that I'm certain is made up.
So here we have a crystal city that has supposedly existed in this mountain. What this does is it undermines the claims of sacredness, right? I want to emphasize, of the indigenous people,
because it was never theirs,
right? Because now the sacredness is conferred on it by the fact of there being a technologically advanced white civilization that lives inside of it. I mean, I think the onion metaphor comes crashing back in here. The implication is that, and I think peeling the revelation onion in this way becomes a very, very crude Western deconstructivist way of understanding things, right? It's that the heart of this mountain, the thing inside of it that makes it work, is something that we already know is there and that already grants legitimacy not only to our worship of it, but our ability to probe it, go into it, climb all over it. I mean,
it really is like a very exquisite metaphor for colonial ambitions of the West, right? I mean, yeah. An obscene level of industrialization, granting, I mean, the only reason that, if you follow the story, I mean, the only way that, the Native Americans could have lived there is, with the permission of the Lemurians. Which, I mean, really reminds one of, reservations and boarding schools and residential schools and all that.
It also reminds one of the ways in which missionaries will say, well, actually, your deities are manifestations, manifestations of our deities. You just don't remember or whatever. You've fallen. Or even if you don't remember, you need to be taught.
Dude, shout out to Joseph Smith.
There's the implication that if you actually had a conversation between some Wintu people and some New Agers like the Telos Society or the I Am or any of these other ones, that there would be it's a completely... that I think the conversation would tend toward... well, from the perspective of the white people involved, no, but see, our religions are compatible, but it's a claim of compatibility that tries to subsume the religion into the Telos Society's understanding of what is going on. There's no way for it to work the other way. When in fact it is exactly the other way. It's exactly a co-optation of what is a holy place by people who want to experience that holiness and also to colonize it, own it, and manipulate it for their own spiritual ambitions.
Yeah. I mean, if this concept isn't like super clear, I mean, you can see it in all kinds of ways. It manifests just about everywhere. I mean, we talk about the way that Christianity co-opted, y'all and Saturnalia and all sorts of things.
Just to use another example that is going to call back on my research that I did during the 2020 war in Artsakh, right? One of these strategies that's been built up, and I was just arguing with somebody about this war on Reddit. A little aside, this guy was like telling me that Stalin gave that region, or sorry, not Stalin, sorry. Well, yeah, Stalin gave that region to Azerbaijan, and the Soviet Union said it was Azerbaijan at the end of the Soviet Union. Therefore, Armenia has no claim on it. They just wanted their loot back, which incidentally is exactly how Azerbaijan tends to conceptualize that land in Artsakh, right? Is as like a resource to be exploited and a place a land to clear of its indigenous inhabitants, And in fact, one of the ways they do this is absolutely by appealing to mythology, which is why I want to also come back to this. Lemuria theory is all but explicitly fascist. It's a way for a bunch of people to gain like a spiritual, I think a feeling of spiritual, I don't know, placidness. What's it called? From basically a fascistic conception of divinity. Like it's a pagan fascist religion, and I don't think that's too harsh. So to go back to what I was actually going to expound on a little bit, so there's these people called the Caucasian Albanians, who were an ancient Christian people that lived in parts of the Caucasus. They're not related to the Western European Albanians or the Central European Albanians. It's just a coincidence of names, in the same way that Iberia, Western Iberia, and Eastern Iberia are not related. So the Caucasian Albanians were a real people, but the claim some pseudo-historians in Azerbaijan have made, they make this claim that actually the ancient Christian churches in Artsakh are not ancient Armenian churches. The texts, any texts that were written in Armenian that are from that time period, were written by Caucasian Albanians. The churches were built by Caucasian Albanians, and also that Caucasian Albanians are the direct ancestors of modern Azeris. These things are all not true, and no historians outside of Azerbaijan believe these things. And in fact, it's not as though Azerbaijani historians, pseudo-historians, have said these things and then no one's talked about it. I mean, literally people have debunked it thoroughly, because there's obviously a big consequences to saying something like that. And the consequence that they want is to have an alternate history of that place that justifies their position there. Like, regular people aren't coming up with this, you know what I mean? People in power are coming up with this, and it's being disseminated by corrupt media channels, and the government is supporting these ideologies. So we tend to think of this particular situation in Shasta as not really as political, because it's post, this mountain is, most people think of it as a part of the United States. So it's easy to think of it as just like, it's just a spiritual fight. And why shouldn't maybe these people have a claim to the spiritual legacy of this, or the spirit of this mountain, if they can share it. But it's not that. of course, for this exact reason, that colonial project needs things like this, or it produces things like this to maintain itself, right? Like this is not just like a like a fascistic white religion. It's like a fascistic white justifying ideology for like the continued occupation of not just this place but sacred places in general in the Americas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we argued before. We had a misunderstanding about. You said like, you said something along the lines of like, it's maybe from the ecofascism episode or something. We were talking about like, it's a different. It's not the same thing for somebody now who is like, you know, in a position of social safety, right? Like an upper class white person that like grows out some dreadlocks and wears huaraches and says like, yeah, the earth goddess, you know, that sort of thing. It's not the same as having like a cultural tradition, right? Like I'm not mad at a specific person for having a specific belief in like the sanctity of a particular place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have like places in my own life that I would like maybe consider referring to as like a shrine or something. Yeah. You know, I haven't built anything there or whatever, but it's not the same as co-opting another culture's mythology. I mean, you know, for all I know, there are people that live in the area of Mount Shasta that have, you know, come down over thousands of years, who have like a true belief in particular features and stories associated with the mountain.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, like I mean, I just don't have specific knowledge of them, so I'm not like I can't commit fully to saying that. But
sure.
It's just it's not the same for somebody to like go to telos.co.uk or whatever the hell, and like, oh, this is where I belong. It's not the same. There's like,
yeah, this is a missionary religion practically. There's like information that has the express goal of trying to spread this religion. Who is it spreading to? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're mostly well-intentioned hippies, but that doesn't mean that what they're doing is acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be honest, I have a feeling that there's a little bit more to this than we think there is. I think that probably if we looked into the motivations of some of the early cult leaders of this religion, we would probably find, I don't know, I just have the suspicion. It just seems so on the nose, some of this stuff. And I think our point last time was it doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be any express political motivation for it still to have a political result and to propagate, again, the background of genocide, you know?
Yeah, nobody. I don't think for a moment that the person that made that Telos website or like the Israeli thing, I don't think for a second people were like, we need to like get those people off of that land so that we can like have a resort there or something. I don't think that was strictly the motivation, but it obviously has happened because of them.
And you know, I actually watched a video about a civilization, I think in modern day Chile, I believe, maybe the coast of modern day Peru. Now I'm having trouble remembering. But an ancient civilization on the west coast of central South America, right? And it was a civilization which sprung up around production of nets using a species of cotton that grew there wildly originally, and then the cultivation of that cotton, and then cities form, and then eventually you have like commercial centers that form a little bit above the cities, above the river, up the river, you know, in the mountains, and how a lot of these civilizations, and this is also the case throughout the history of like the Incan Empire as well, even later, I think, is that, well, and I don't want to make any explicit claims, but this was a city that which basically became a trade hub and then ended up incorporating the deities of all of these neighboring groups and religions, became cosmopolitan. And so what I'm saying is like, it's not like, I don't want to make it sound like we're saying that like, and I don't think we have made it sound like it, but it just occurred to me, we're not saying that like people can't share holy spaces. But there's something, if you just say like, well, both of these groups, the people who have lived there for thousands of years and the people who are coming there on pilgrimages now and violating all of the traditional rules of the mountain, like how to approach the mountain. It's not that they aren't both earnest. It's that their claims are not equal, right? And that one of them, that their relationships with that mountain are fundamentally different, and that we should not just pretend that can go away.
Well, like you have to like, you have to like examine, like, for example, like why is the Bible, like, why does that take place anywhere besides like Nineveh and wherever Jesus is from? Where's Jesus from?
Bethlehem,
Bethlehem,
Nazareth.
Like you have to Nazareth. Okay, whatever. It's all the same to me. I have no idea about the geography of that. But like, you have to wonder, like, okay, are they putting Egypt there because like it's actually significant, or is it because they need to inject a little bit of legitimacy into the region so that they can then go and evangelize? They have to inject themselves into the region before they can convince anybody that they have legitimacy there.
Yeah, that's true. They've literally taken advantage of the fact that a couple of hikers like reported these experiences to then basically create the thing about it being called telos is really interesting too. Like that there's a telos to it. Like it's that the thing that justifies our being there is already there. Thus, we come from all over the world and we clog up the mountainside with our rituals.
We did it last time, and I think we should probably do it this time. We should actually define telos.
Yeah.
So,
doc.
Just per Wikipedia here. What?
Oh, go ahead. Yours will be more thorough.
What? Okay. Yeah, so per Wikipedia here, telos is a Greek word meaning end, purpose, or goal, and a term used by Aristotle to refer to the full potential or inherent purpose or objective of a person or thing. I was talking last week about how sensitive I am to meta commentary, and it's not lost on me here.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
I mean, this is like the thing that like really brought what am I trying to say? It's the thing that really galvanized the whole process of getting to the end of that episode into what became the thesis for today's episode.
Yeah.
The fact that the city is called Telos. Yeah.
Yeah, that has an element of like some John Dee-esque like spell casting for whoever in the group decided to coin that term. Like, let's just make this thing the goal. Let's get people here. It just feels like a magical working and not a good one.
Yeah. I mean, black magic is a term for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It makes me also think, again, not my concept, but the idea of the Wetiko as possibly an explanation for just like the cannibalistic greed of certain white people, and the way that even when people don't act on it on purpose, the fact that it's present in white society, I think does something for these things too. And not that it's not present in other societies, right? It's a myth of that didn't originate. It didn't originate to describe white people, right? But it absolutely fits here that even if some people are just repeating, it's kind of in a Borgesian way, like manifesting something that originates elsewhere from others around them, and maybe within their numbers, that the fact that we don't have a technology to address that in a really hard, steadfast way, American society, means that like there's constantly spaces opened up for those behaviors to just like have rampant consequences all across everywhere, even by people who maybe are completely steadfast in their aims. Maybe telos, because I mean, and again, it's encapsulated in the name. The idea of telos, like, it sounds like the idea of the city, this point of arrival. It sounds like a positive thing. But again, it's what if it's what if it's not? You know what I mean?
I mean, it's not not the same thing, right? Okay, so whatever. So the Wendigo. Okay, it's so crazy to me that the Revelation Onion is still so important to the discussion of Mount Shasta, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, of course, there are layers to the Wendigo, right? You know, at first glance, it's a story, right? And that's it. And then you spend a little bit of time thinking about it. You peel back a layer of the revelation onion, and you say, okay, well, this is the kind of story that you tell to kids to make sure that kids don't grow up and be cannibals.
Yeah, literally
Because
or figuratively.
there are consequences.
Probably figuratively.
Yeah, there are consequences to cannibalism, and this is why you don't do it. It's the same as, like, you know, maybe the story of Icarus is just a warning to, like, keep your hand off the fucking stove. That, you know, it was kind of just lost eventually.
Right. And again, figuratively or literally. Probably figuratively. Yeah. Definitely figuratively.
If you touch the stove, your hand's going to be hot, and then you're going to try to put it in water, but it's not going to help.
You'll die.
We'll have to amputate the hand. There goes. You can't flap anymore.
I should make a note that personally, I don't think that these stories are as on the nose as that, but there's a sense in which all of these things can be folded in, can be part of a story. Like the fact of the experience of going too far towards something in your naiveness, despite a warning. I mean, there's a part of Icarus that's also present in, like, the Big Bad Wolf. You know, with Icarus, you get somebody who's abusing, like, basically a power granted to them, but in this case by his father. You know, and then because he abuses it, he dies. In Big Bad Wolf, you get a kid who's abusing the power of, well, really, like, language, you know, but again, the power of language that's granted to him basically by his elders, by the rest of the community, which is, if you need help, we will help you. And he abuses that, and he pays the price. He dies. Just two stories of hubris, but they're different types of hubris. I mean, we could talk about other religious groups that have done similar things. To an extent, Mormons have done a similar thing.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I did say shout out to Joseph Smith earlier in this episode.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what the Mormons did. I mean, that's...
Oh, it's really... I mean, they didn't just do it with the mythology and the reasons for things being holy. They did it with the people themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they wrote them into the Book of Mormon as, what, the Canaanites?
I think they were... Yeah, were they the Canaanites? Some of the lost tribes, right? That was
well, because I always remember that the Canaanites are people of color, and that I feel like is a little bit more white colonialism about how, like, the Canaanites are bad because Cain killed Abel.
Yeah, no, there is...
That's why they have melanin.
I think what it actually was the 12 tribes, the lost tribes.
Yeah, they were I think they were a tribe.
I thought the Canaanites were not one of the 12 tribes of Israel because they're Canaanites, not Israelites. But I could be wrong because I know that they did merge at some point, historically speaking.
They lived in the land of Canaan, an area which, according to ancient texts, may have included parts of modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. I think it was called Canaan because they were Canaanites, because they were about Cain, is what I understood it to be. But I suppose I can't be certain because I'm not a theologian.
I'm not sure that that's right. The 12 tribes definitely were the thing, though, in this situation with the LDS. That they become the indigenous people of the Americas.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely predate the Bible by a long shot. Prior to 4500 BC, so...
Yeah, so the Canaanites were actually absorbed by the Israelites when they were conquered by them, for the most part. They're mostly absorbed by them. So I think I was talking about earlier, like, when two people claim a spiritual place, like, it's not neutral how that comes out. I mean, the easy argument is that the historical time that's passed is so short. Like, it's people who have lived here forever and people who want to set up a pilgrimage destination, which are two very different ways of being religious, you know. Um, and and then you have also the fact that, like we heard in the video, like the way that the 1MM went to like respect the one of the things that they do to respect the beings who live on the mountain, in the mountain, is they don't go above the tree line. That's reserved for the beings. And so, because you now have another group who is there, who then does not have that to hold necessarily to that rule. Maybe some of them do, you know, because I think there's definitely a spectrum of like how many of the indigenous beliefs are being mimicked and absorbed by the white people who go there that are part of these various groups. But it's definitely not a hard, fast rule in the same way. And also, why should it be? Because like you're not really worshiping the same beings.
You're not practicing the same religion. It's like Mecca doesn't mean anything to me.
Right, but it's not right. But it's like there's something about it that's, you know, you could reduce it, do a historical reductionist, and just be like, well, you know, this has happened before. This is what happens with religions. But I think it's bullshit, and I think that there needs to be a distinction between the validity of a religion like Telos and the indigenous religion of the region. Again, because there is literally no way to make that Western religion non-colonial. Like, you can't have people going on pilgrimages to this place making claims about where the divinity in the mountain springs from. The thing about it is they need the indigenous people's beliefs in order for their religion to function and to exist. But they think that essentially, if you were to really dig down to the center of that onion, the truth is that the people who have this religion ostensibly believe that the indigenous people need them, need their religion for their, like, they need their religion to be true in order for the indigenous religion to be true, which is, I think, a big problem in general. We're circling back to something earlier, which is like the ways in which colonizer religions mix with indigenous religions and put pressure on them. I think the difference here is that it's pretty bad. It's like, it's as much as like there is a danger, it's not as though there is a political pressure for those people directly to the indigenous people to adopt that viewpoint. It's more, the more white people are there, the less they're able to easily and fully and properly respect the mountain. And in fact, like, they have to watch people like, and it's not like they're just sitting back and watching, but but all they can do basically is like appeal to these people to like not go against their own beliefs about how the mountain should be treated and what its significance is. But there are people who basically take for granted that their religion has caused this other religion to be possible.
Yeah, there's this thing that happens with religion where new ones are usually just kind of laughed out of the room immediately, right? It's like, it's not unusual for a new religion to come into being. It's not unusual. I mean, it's literally documented in every book about religion, right? The Bible is like, it describes the not progeny. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with my vocabulary today? It describes like how Christianity came into being,
And when you have a religion like Christianity that's built on books that were written over thousands of years, you also see the religion develop. Like, you can see like the earliest layers of Judaism that Christianity incorporates via the Old Testament are layers in which like the monotheistic religion is not fully monotheistic yet. It's not fully formed. There you see little references to like the way that Genesis words certain things, that the fact that angels sort of like are not fully unambiguously completely a separate category from God yet. There's traces of that still. And there's historical reasons for that. We know about how Judaism goes from being, a cult of one God with other gods acknowledged to increasingly a cult of a single God and no other gods acknowledged. It's not an overnight transition. There's political, complex reasons for that to happen. Not just political. I don't want to reduce it to a political transition. That would.
Yeah. Part of what I was trying to drive at is that, we write off new religions that happen, except for some reason Mormonism and Scientology. I don't get that. I don't know why they survived, but
I think colonialism is a big part of why Mormonism survived.
In the religions that we are generally privy to, we have a lot of information about. We have like Buddhism and Taoism that we have, books, and they have a certain degree of cultural cachet for us. The white man has been largely kept out of indigenous American religions. I know only little bits and pieces about a couple of them, that usually because there's limited resources, there's not a lot of contemporary writings from during significant moments in a religion's history.
Yeah, kept out, meaning our ancestors just marginalized them, destroyed them, and also have no interest in adopting them.
Yeah, but what I mean is we now are kept out of that because of all these things that have happened, because they're things that are important to the people that have them as their own traditions and maybe as their current beliefs. And so I think we have even less respect for them than, we do for, like, say, Rastafarianism or something, or, voodoo, or Buddhism. I mean, people co-opt Buddhism for all sorts of things, like, but I just don't think for most people that there is even enough material for them to respect. They have no access to knowledge and therefore cannot. I think they find it very easy to not build up any basis of respect for most indigenous American religions. And there's nothing wrong with them, being obscure to us. It's just a matter of we use that as an excuse to co-opt sacred sites, holy places. I mean, like you said about Lake Onondaga.
Yeah, another right, and there's no such idea that, like, at least anything that gets documented and talked about, of like a white person or just a non-indigenous person, going to that place or living in that place and going to that place and saying, can I feel that this mountain is holy, but I don't know what that means to me. Like, can I talk to you? Like, or any element of like people wanting to become part of those societies, which is not an unheard of thing in the history of like white people interacting with indigenous people. But the fact is that, like, in the context in which this religion is springing up, that's basically an impossibility. The only way to create the holiness of this mountain for white people who have some kind of intuition about it being holy that maybe comes from their previous knowledge of the religion or of the other indigenous religion. And then they go there and they just operate on a completely separate channel in the same place. There's no idea of this place being rooted to the people who live there.
I think it's less intuition and more just vague awareness.
Vague awareness of, mountain is holy.
Yeah, you get a little snippet of it, and if you're like, you're that kind of open-minded person where your brain actually is just a sieve, and that's your brand of open-mindedness.
And I think that's wild about this is that there's people that live all across the world in small communities that think of this mountain as their holy site, like their Mecca. You know what I mean? Their Jerusalem. This is a place to go. It's a place to go, but how can you go there? And the thing that they get wrong about the holiness is that the holiness is completely inextricable from the land, right? It's completely part of the land. But there's people who think you can experience the divinity of this place, or for whom ostensibly you can experience the divinity of this place just by going to it, just by existing in that space. And it's like this question of like, if you go to a place and you conquer it and whatever, or you go to it as an outsider, are you really at that? Are you there? Are you really there? And that's an idea that works well in Western religions, in Eurasian religions, but it's not an idea that I think is especially common in the history of indigenous religions in the Americas. Yeah. So what's to be done? What's our solution, Randy? What's our business plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, I always talk. I always think about like, what if, what if, you heard about like I don't remember what they were called, but they were like they were like a group that like, identified with like Moorish, political shit, and they're sovereign citizens. This just happened a week or two
Oh,
ago.
Rise of the
Maybe.
Moors. Yeah, heard this on the radio.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Yeah. So imagine if there was a group that you could equate to that, but they were, say they were Wyandotte or something, and they decided that they were going to expand their territory, right? Because they want more than what the U.S. government has given them. They are entitled to more than that. Or say, what does it say about me that like if a representative of the Onondaga came to my house and said like this is ours, because that's what it's not exactly what the Moors did. They Rise of the Moors, they sawed the locks off a lady's house and claimed it as their own and installed new locks, and she couldn't get in. But if like a delegation from the Onondaga came to me and said like, you are on our land and you need to, we're turfing you got to go. On the one hand, like I agree that it's not mine. I mean, my name's not on the deed or anything. It's my parents', but I don't agree. You can't have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna call the police, and then you'll be taken away again from your, something that was stolen from you, right?
Mm.
So imagine the people that are native to the area of Mount Shasta. Imagine if they just said there are no more white people that come up this mountain. This line of demarcation that we have traditionally it's being enforced now. That wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. And that's
no,
really,
it'd be,
right. That's what speaks to the colonial aspect of this that we were trying to. It's a great example.
It would be treated as Waco.
Yeah, it's a positive example. But exactly, 100%. It would be treated as, what are these people doing? They're occupying the space that's for everyone or whatever. This land is your land or whatever.
Yeah, or maybe depending on the agency in charge, like this is not yours. This belongs to the government, and you have no right to this place.
There's if you go out to Cayuga County, I think I told you about this. There's signs I was seeing when I was going out there with Hosmic to go to this waterfall that we want to swim at. They say no sovereign nation, or no reservation, no sovereign nation. And I looked up what it is, and I found this article all about it. And I'll just read you the title of this article. I found an article about this, and I'll read you the abstract, right? No sovereign nation, no reservation. Producing the new colonialism in Cayuga County. County, but also country in parentheses. Okay. This is a article from Territory Politics Governance from 2016. Since 1980, the Cayuga Nation has worked through various U.S. political legal mechanisms to establish sovereignty over land taken from them by European settlers and their descendants in what is today New York State, beginning in the 1700s. When, in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to review a lower court's dismissal of their case, the Cayugas began purchasing land they claim from local, non-Cayuga property owners. Relatedly, they petitioned the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs to place the land that they collectively own into federal trust, which would exempt them from various taxes. These efforts have engendered strong opposition from elements of the non-native population, particularly the organization Upstate Citizens for Equality, UCE. This article interrogates the discourse of UCE and its allies and antecedents, one that effectively nationalizes the Cayugas by producing them as, quote, normal U.S. citizens, as well as that of the federal courts. It illustrates how a discourse emphasizing equality, fairness, U.S. nationhood, and private property obfuscates the Cayugas' dispossession and the nature of their land claim to reproduce a colonized space and to give rise to what we call, quote, the new colonialism, producing an impasse whose overcoming requires a far-reaching rethinking of territory and sovereignty. I don't know, what could be more relevant to what we're talking about. It's so real, and it's not far from us.
Yeah. I mean, it like you always hear about history repeating itself, and people always say that, and I usually think it's pretty annoying. But I mean, like, how different exactly is that from Wounded Knee?
Yeah.
You know, and how different is Mount Shasta from Wounded Knee? Like,
Yeah, you have the majority, the colonizing majority, defining for you what you are and how you relate to your land. And the only reason they can do that is power. What they're basically making an argument for is an argument to keep their power. And you see the same thing. It's this it's hidden, but it's really an argument for white power with the Telos Society's claim as well. And I'm not saying, and the thing about Mormons, like I always try not to like criticize Mormonism uniquely, but the thing that I will criticize about Mormonism is the white supremacist aspect of claiming in your mythology the indigenous people of an entire continent. Yeah, I mean, so it goes on, and in fact, I'd like to maybe read that article if I can find it. Maybe I'll have to buy it. I don't know. Consider talking about it later because, well, maybe just as an appendix at least, because it's something that I partly care about even more because it's close to me. And because the way that I found out about it was very visceral, like I'm seeing, I mean, not visceral compared to what the Cayuga people are experiencing that have to do this fucking legal fight, but I just mean seeing these signs and being like, oh shit, it's white people who are pretending that their goal is equality, and in another situation of equality not being equal, equality being, okay, well, ignore the background of the power dynamic, and then pretending that that's just part of the universe that we live in. What's equal?
yeah, I mean, modern America has defined, equality between, whites and natives, as like a casino. You can have a casino, even if gambling's illegal.
Yeah.
Or you can sell the cheap cigarettes,
Yeah.
Below the state minimum and stuff.
Yeah.
You can, your economy is basically like centered on our vices.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Here's an
really
incentive, right? Here's an incentive to center your economy on our vices.
Yeah. I mean, there's conversations to be had about food sovereignty, and like, I to circle back around to like how can I expect somebody that's like not a thinker, the sieve brain that I was talking about earlier, how can I expect them to respect a religion that, as far as I can tell, doesn't really have like a stake, planted in the ground that says this is our territory.
Yeah, it doesn't work like
you
that.
You can walk around, you can see a mosque, you can see a church, you can see a synagogue, but how many places can you go and see like this is a place that Native Americans have to themselves, and this is where their culture is the culture, and this is where you can see that it manifests and is real. I mean that was part of obviously the whole campaign of like settling America was to eradicate those things and sequestered. I mean, there's nothing about Nedro to me that says reservation, right?
And part of that's also because like you have a cartoonish like idea of a reservation that bombards you all the time.
But there's a McDonald's down the road.
Yeah, it's like
all I mean to say is that we've put people in a situation where we've done as much as we can, at least on a surface level, aesthetically, to strip away any sign of there being something else here.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Mount Shasta is all about.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like a strange symbol of a thing that we think is in the past.
It's a stark reminder that it continues, and it's not even this and the Cayuga thing. It's not the highest stakes example of it either. but it's the same. The cause, or at least one of the causes, is one.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what if like 2 years from now there's like a Marriott or something on, in the crater of Mount Shasta? Like, I mean, it's making me wonder, like, is there anything that I can learn from, like, Parasite having like a Cowboys and Indians thing that goes on?
I think so. I think we talked about that a lot. I remember a lot of my notes about that.
I wasn't. I don't remember having got it anyway. I don't know. Maybe I did, but it at the time it just seemed like something about America. Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.